Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I am your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Captain Henry Kroll. Henry, it's always a pleasure to have you on board, and it's such fascinating information here, and I do encourage everybody to access your website and get that free download. It's fascinating.
Well, I'm giving away free books. You can check it out. There's about 4 of them on there. There's some Coast and Geodetic Survey books that are government publications. One of them goes right into their website, so it's if you're interested in mining gold in Alaska, you're going to need that information. So,
yeah, that sounds like fun. Definitely. All right, so you're diving into the cosmos here. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, we're pretty much done with that, except for one thing there. A lot of people believe that the moon, they believe mainstream science, that the moon was formed billions of years ago with the Earth, and it just sort of materialized out there. But I didn't quite believe that, and we started wondering what caused the Great Flood. It was 11,700 years ago, 800 years ago. Noah's flood and the world cataclysm there. So something impacted the Earth. I think it was the Arctic Ocean, and it killed off all the camels, horses, and mastodons in North America, wiped out civilizations everywhere. And so we used an online computer. It's Arizona EDU/impact effects, and we put the mass of the moon in there, which is 7.35 20 kilograms, and the mass of the Earth is 5.98 24 kilograms. And anybody can do this. And if you want to know what the mass of the Earth is and the moon, you just type it into Google and it'll tell you. And we put it into this computer, Arizona EDU/impact effects. It's based on rock hitting rock. Anybody can use it. It's online. You can put any object in there. And we use an angle of 11 degrees, which is twice space shuttle entry angles. We figured it would bounce off the Earth or the atmosphere at that angle, because we know space shuttle angle is 7.5 degrees, and it's to dive into the atmosphere. And if you go too much, it'll burn up, and if too little, so there's about a 4-degree window that they can bring the space shuttle back in. This is just normal stuff, So anyway, we use a angle of 11 degrees and a speed of 2 kilometers per second. Put it into the computer. Came back with data that with a 750 teramegaton impact, and it was enough to tilt Earth 23.5 degrees. Also would depress Earth's crust 5 kilometers and bounce back up to 1.3 kilometers. Well, the average depth of the Arctic Ocean is 1.3 kilometers. I thought that was kind of synchronistic. So whatever it was, it impacted there. It's pretty sure it was the moon. I did a lot of research on the moon, and the Russians think it's the Death Star. It's an alien spaceship. It's hollow. It's got an ocean inside, a saltwater ocean. It has geysers of steam coming out of it now and then. Maybe they're underground factories. We don't know. But anyway, they dropped they had seismic instruments on the moon. They dropped the booster rockets from one of the space shuttle missions, and it impacted the moon's surface, and it rang for 20 minutes. It was like a bell. And they thought maybe, well, it's got a crust. It's 20 miles deep, or 20 kilometers deep, and then there's an iron shell underneath, this metal shell of some kind. So it's possible it's an ancient thing created to terraform planets, If there was no moon, you see, Earth would have been, Earth at one time, the year was actually 360 days, not 365 and a quarter. Ancient calendars show this. It was 360 days. People weren't stupid in ancient times. They could count the number of days in a year. So somebody put it out, and we also covered with ice during the Ice Age, which was, we're in this 100,000 or 50,000 year ice age where most of the Earth is covered with ice. And so to mine gold, these guys had to tilt Earth to thaw the ice back. But prior to that, we're in this 360-day orbit around the sun, And we had huge ice caps on the North and South poles, but the North Pole was at the southern tip of Greenland. It wasn't where it is now, near the middle of, southern part of Greenland. And you can prove this, take a protractor and find a map, and you notice that all the lakes in Canada, the Great Bear, the Great Slave, the Great Lakes, are all lined up in an arc. So you adjust your protractor to that arc, and that was the tip of the ice sheet at one time where these lakes were. And you extend it around, and it was a huge ice sheet. It went all the way over to Norway and carved out the fjords of ice over there. Just basic logic stuff. You can look at Google Earth and do this, or print off maps and do it. So anyway, I used the protractor and looking for where the rotational pole was, and it apparently shifted about 2,000 miles in about 20 minutes. And whoever did this knew what they were doing. May have done it before with other planets, but it put us into a circular orbit around our sun. We had summers and winters prior to that because we're in a elliptical orbit. We're much closer to the sun, but we had these huge ice caps, and so by putting us into a more circular orbit around the sun, it put it out a little bit further, and now we have a 365 and a quarter day year. And it doubled plankton blooms, saw the ice caps back 2,000 miles because now we're tilted at 23.5 degrees. So the sun can penetrate deeper into the oceans and melt the ice in the northern and southern hemispheres as we orbit around it. We have better, more pronounced seasons. And then the moon's gravity keeps the interior part of the Earth liquid better because it imparts a tremendous gravity. It raises the Earth crust a foot at the equator or more, and as it orbits around Earth, as the Earth turns underneath it, I mean. And it increases volcanism, which replenishes carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Volcanoes give off a lot of carbon dioxide and water. And it did a lot of wonderful things for the Earth, and it wasn't all done for humans, I don't think. It was done so they could mine more gold, Gold was what they were after. And it's monatomic gold. They burn it into the white powder of gold, and it's called ormus, or ormus, O-R-M-U-S. I wrote a book on it more than 20 years ago, and it's an actual substance, and the guy has patents on it, is David Hudson. He's a farmer in Phoenix, Arizona. Apparently, they take it off planet because it doesn't weigh anything when it's the white powder. They burn it into this white powder at high temperatures, gold and other platinum group metals for exotic metals. And we use it in our bodies. And it's one of the mineral supplements that our bodies use is monatomic gold. It's 2 atoms of gold combined, and all the protons are in the center part of it, and they're kind of like magnets of the same polarity. So they push apart, it creates a much larger particle. Nucleus is 10 times larger, and the electrons orbit way out there at 1,000 Fermis or more, and they're in a plane like a little solar system. And some of them are cone-shaped, depending on their energy state, but that's neither here nor there. They have weak atomic forces, and you can transmute them into other elements by pulling out protons. You got double the number there. You can make any element you want out of them. You use magnetic pulse, and that's what our mitochondria within our human cells do, from what we can gather. And you sell this material online. You can buy ormus online now. People sell it. It comes in a foil pouch. I wrote the book on it 20 years ago. Pfizer developed the recipes that I put in the book. There's 6 recipes to take it out of sea salt or anything grown in the ocean, like seawater or limestone is grown in the ocean by plants. And anything with, certain soils that have a lot of trace minerals in it, and Great Salt Lake precipitate. Well, any of these things, source items, you go online, you can find it, type in how to make the Philosopher's Stone.
Do you still have your book or no? Henry, do you still have your book?
Yeah, it's available.
Okay. On Amazon?
It has the recipes in there from Pfizer, but they take it off planet and they spray it in their atmosphere to make everything grow better. And everybody lives hundreds of years, thousands of years. And their planet is much richer. And we take aluminum powder and boron and virus and spray it over the major cities on this planet. I hear Donald Trump stopping this spraying overhead by jet airliners.
Oh, good.
Chemtrails.
Geoengineering. Well, that's creating the global warming, too.
We're spending, it is. It's ridiculous. They're spending billions of dollars spraying chemicals on it. It's the same outfit that used to spray defoliant material over in Vietnam. They brought them over here, and they base out of Oklahoma. And then they were spraying, Agent Orange over there. Well, they were spraying Parquat and stuff to stop the pot growers back in the 60s and 70s in Mexico. And they were spraying their crops over there so they wouldn't grow pot anymore. But then they started Evergreen Air is the name of the outfit, if you don't believe me. Look it up. Anyway, I got a lot of pictures of the inside of their airplanes and stuff. I've been reading up on this stuff myself, to kind of figure out what they're up to. But, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, sabotage, big time.
Well, if you spray monatomic gold up there, it stays up there because it has sort of anti-gravity properties, and whatever does filter down, it can be utilized by the plants to grow better. There's a friend of mine that teaches a 2-day seminar over in Eastern Oregon. His name is Barry Carter. He read my book about 20 years ago. And he called me up, and he teaches people all how to make it and all about it. And he shows pictures on his website. Barry Carter is his name. On his website of plants that he watered with it, and they grow twice as fast or tall as plants that aren't watered with it.
I bet, yeah.
Because the plants can utilize it to make the proper elements for complete cell division. And we do the same thing with our bodies. You have to replicate 8 to 10 body cells every million body cells. 8 million of them is 6 to 8 million a second, I guess it is, depending on the size of your body, to maintain your present form. And that requires energy, and mitochondria furnish that energy. These are little alien cells you inherit from your mother at birth, and then they replicate themselves as the egg divides. And it's all based on the cell reproduction rates based on the number of base pairs per turn of DNA. So when you're conceived, you have 50 base pairs per turn, and the cells replicate very fast. And when you come out of the womb and you're born, they're down to 25 base pairs per turn. The cell reproduction rate slows down a little bit. And at age 20, you have 20 base pairs per turn. And that's the point where you start losing body cells from age 20 on, because the DNA unravels. And at age 50, you're down to 5 base pairs per turn of DNA. You have 3 billion RNA DNA sequences, and they're wrapped up tight, and this number of base pairs per turn is what they go by there. And if you can tighten it up, wrap it up a little better by furnishing more energy to the cells, theoretically you can wind the DNA up tighter and you can live longer. That's why I called it the Philosopher's Stone. But this technology is not new. It's been around thousands of years.
Right.
Moses and guys could travel across the deserts, and they get to these springs. There's nothing to eat there. There might be a palm tree or two. They had it all mapped out, and they take some of the dirt. It used to be an ocean at one time, so it's got all the trace minerals in it, and all the orbitally rearranged atoms are in there because of the oceans, and they take that and they burn it. They boil it in a pot of water for 5 days in boiling water. Well, the spring waters are very alkaline. You can barely drink them. I've tasted some of the ones in Death Valley. It's really bad. And, anyway, after 5 days, it becomes a deadly poison because of the alkalinity. It's like lye, like drinking lye. It would burn your mouth, or all your hair would fall out and kill you, probably, or get really sick. So what they do is they pour this clear liquid out. You can't see anything in the liquid at all. Throw the dirt away. They add a wine to that or a vinegar to lower the pH, and then to where it becomes compatible to pH around 6 for the human body, something like that. And then they can drink that, and it's taking God's inner light into your body. They had words for that in ancient Hebrew. And then, or they could dry it out, and they couldn't put it in direct sunlight because sometimes it might catch fire and burn like a metallic burn, like a magnesium strip or something, but give off a lot of light and beta radiation. But anyway, they put it in the Ark of the Covenant once it's dry, and it's like a dry white powder. And you have to keep it in a Faraday cage to exclude magnetic fields. And that's what the Ark is. It's basically a wood box with layers of metal to exclude magnetic fields. I don't believe they had to carry the 10 Commandments around there in this thing, because once you ate this material, you didn't have to read those. You know, they were in your mind because your brain is expanded. You know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, so thou shalt not have any God before thee, you know, etc. It's just first 5 commandments are to God himself, and the other 5, well, actually there are 50 altogether in the Hebrews text. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. They had certain laws, the Talmudic laws that they lived by, and they were developed over 1,000 years or more, several thousand years. But they had this technology to live longer, and they didn't feed it to ordinary people. They put this mineral supplement that was in the Ark. They put it in their priest bread, and it's an unleavened, coarse-grained bread, and it's hard to digest, which takes it through the stomach area. You can eat any amount of this material. You can order it on the web nowadays. It's Philosopher's Stone or Ormus, O-R-M-U-S, O-R-M-E-S, and eat any amount. It won't hurt you. It goes right through you, and it combines with hydrochloric acid in the stomach. But if you fast for 20 days or more, it reduces the hydrochloric in the stomach, and then you can absorb a lot more of it into the lower intestine. But by eating it in the priest bread, it can go through the stomach more and be absorbed more in the lower intestine. So they had this technology down. Sometimes they'd fast, and sometimes they'd eat the priest bread. Priest bread was very highly prized compared with ordinary bread, because they had this magic powder they would put in there to make people more intelligent and make them live longer. Now, monatomic rhodium can increase brain synapse to make it a lot more intelligent, can raise your IQ. And the gold, of course, monatomic gold, enables the mitochondria to produce proper elements for complete cell division and more energy. And by just having this knowledge, you can eat more things out of the ocean, seaweed and other things that has the worms in it. And certain soils that have been, you take all your ashes and everything, pour it on the soil, those trees absorb these minerals, and you're putting it back in your garden when you don't do that, you see. And chemical fertilizers don't do that.
Right.
So most of the stuff we eat in the supermarkets hasn't got anything in it, no minerals or no worms. So everybody's getting dumber and lacking of energy, and we're getting more immune diseases too, you know, diabetes and everything else because of the mineral deficiencies. You know, that can be traced back to mineral deficiencies, all of that stuff.
Are you still taking the monoatomic gold? Do you take it every day?
No, not really, but I do know where it comes from, so I can eat the certain items that where it was grown on the soil. I have my own gardens here and grew a lot of potatoes and broccoli and other things here.
That's good. Yeah. You sound great, Henry. You sound awesome.
All my wood ashes on there, and well, I'll probably be around for 95 years or more.
I bet.
I'm running a boat in the summer. I'm still running a boat, and I tendered 200,000 pounds of salmon last summer. I had one deckhand to begin with, and then I got another guy on there when we start picking up a lot of fish. And I pick up fish with a hydraulic boom off of aluminum fish scows, and they're anchored up around Callaghan Island on the west side of Callaghan Island. It's a 12-mile long island. Then I go over to Point Harriet and pick up fish over there. I have some folks that I take over there every year on my boat, and I tow their 2 skiffs over there and their scow. It takes about 6 hours to tow it over there. It's a big, and they have it loaded with everything. I mean, it's like propane and lumber and all kinds of stuff piled on this 40-foot scow. And their 2 skiffs are full of tomato plants and dog food and dogs. And it's like a big circus. I got to get a calm day across Cook Inlet and tow them over there every year and then bring them back in the fall. And we've been really lucky so far.
And Henry?
That's one of the...
We have a question for you. Bill wants to know if you think all of Orion comes from the absorbed Sagittarius galaxy into the Milky Way along with our sun.
Well, Orion is a long ways from Sagittarius. You see, Sagittarius is pointing at the center of our galaxy. And I don't know how far the Sagittarius stars are from us even. I think they're maybe 20,000 light years away or more. Some of them, depends, because what we're seeing is just random clusters between here and there. And we can't even see the center of our own galaxy because there's so much dust and clouds and there's stars in the way, and lots of light over there too, but it's all in the heat, ultraviolet, the infrared light, and there's no way to photograph it because there's so much dirt and dust to make stuff out of. But Orion itself is one of the birthplaces of stars. There's other ones in the other arms of the galaxies of our own galaxy, but they're very far away from us. So we weren't born in these other birthplaces. Our sun had to be born in Orion. It's the nearest birthplace to us, and we're leaving the area. So basic logic says we were born in Orion.
That makes sense. And plus what you were talking about earlier too with the sacred sites in correlation to Orion.
And I'm not an astronomer. I'm a commercial fisherman, so
Well, I applaud you for your work. You know what?
This stuff, and I appreciate everybody that But I got a bunch of scientists agreeing with me. You have to. Somebody's got to do this stuff, and I don't know why they haven't. Why haven't they figured out where we're going, where we came from?
Well, the thing is, do they know and they're just not saying anything, or it's very, very interesting. I love your work. I think your work is incredible, and I appreciate it.
Well, I don't think they know. They just can't think like I do. They're not on a basic level. See, in order for me to function in Alaska, I have to use a lot of common sense and logic to hunt or to run boats or do anything up here. You see, you have to depend on yourself more than other places, and you have to acquire knowledge to live in an area. To fish where we fish our set-net sites, it might take the average person 10 years to learn all the tricks of the tide, where to set the nets, what stage of tide to set them, when it's not good weather to set. There's a whole myriad of things you have to kind of learn and then relearn every year because you forget. And you make stupid mistakes once in a while. I do, but, you use rocks. I use boulders over there. There's huge boulders. And some of them are the size of houses. You can tell what height of the tide is just by looking at those rocks, And in big tides, you get a lot of current, so you don't set certain nets, because they go underwater or get too tight. And then when the logs and driftwood hit them, it can tear them up. And then you get storms and you go out on the river bar. I'm trying to get on the Discovery Channel. I told them that we catch a lot of king salmon out there sometimes, maybe 10 or so, and occasional halibut, and you might like that. I don't know. Some of my friends on the Discovery Channel, the Kilchers, I know these guys, all of them, in Homer, and they're out there trying to make stories out of building cabins in the wilderness and camping out in Tonsina Bay and on a barge and different hunting trips and fishing trips and stuff they're showing. But we do that for a living. That's how we homestead at the west side of Cook Inlet. It's very remote and pristine. We have trips that we can make over there too. We have Duck Island. There's a bird sanctuary designated by Roosevelt, and then we get to watch puffins dive off the rocks. And then there's these hollow bridges of rock, sea caves that can come out of these caves after they dive off up above there. It's kind of interesting, fun to watch. And then a lot of seagulls and puffins and oyster catches and murres and kittiwakes and herring gulls, of course. When I was a kid, we used to go there and climb up the rocks, but it's probably illegal now, but we take a marking pen and we put an X on all the eggs we find in the nest, see? And then we come back the next day and any egg didn't have a mark on it, we could pick it out and take it home and eat it. It tastes a little fishy, but you can make cakes and stuff out of them, you know. They're bright orange yolks, and they're bigger than chicken eggs.
Yeah.
These are just things we used to do, you know. We used to do a lot of things.
When you had a real life, actually. Times have changed, haven't, for everybody. For the youth of America,
we
anyways.
Were part of the wilderness, we're kind of melded into it. We became just like everything else over there, the bears or whatever. We got a lot of bears. The bears we go in my wife's skiff over there, and they turn their nets over last summer because there might be fish underneath them or something. And they bite holes in the gas can, and we got little coolers in there we put ice in, and they bite holes in those. And
what do you do to deter them?
Fish tote. Huh?
What do you do to deter them?
She carries a shotgun, a 12-gauge shotgun, a stainless steel one. I mean, she's a little lady that carries this big, heavy gun around, and she's also got a 44 Magnum pistol that I'm afraid to shoot because it kicks like a mule. It's a little pistol, and I'm scared of the thing. Got a hair trigger on it. She likes it. I shot it once, and it went off prematurely in the dirt in front of me. And I never touched it again.
I guess that'll scare a bear off.
So anyway.
That's funny.
Yeah, we eat black bear occasionally if we get a young or one in the spring. They come out of hibernation and start eating grass, and they have really white fat, and they taste good, But later on, they start eating fish and other things, and then they get not so good. But
and do they get aggressive with you guys?
What?
Do they get aggressive, the bears, with you?
Oh, yeah, sometimes they do, but I don't know. They kind of live with us now. They know we're part of their domain, so they kind of stay away. But they did eat one of our bigger fish totes. It's about 4 feet by 4 feet on the fish scow. I had this big raft I put out to put ice on it, and it was a broken tote anyway. It's an old one and had cracks and holes in it, so blood leaked down into the styrofoam from the fish. They turned it over and they ate the styrofoam, the foam, this urethane foam. They'll eat anything. I had a cache of dynamite a long time ago. We used to use it for various things when they're homesteading, blowing up stumps and building roads and digging ditches and whatever. And I removed a few rocks with it. We had boulders on my airport over there. I've owned 4 airplanes, I'm a pilot, so you have to be a pilot in Alaska if you want to get around because there's no roads over there.
Yeah, no kidding. Right.
The first plane I had was a Citabria, and the second one was a Cessna 175 with a seaplane prop on it. It was 8 foot diameter, and it had big tires on it, and I could carry 2,000 pounds of salmon in that thing, but kind of flattened the tires out, taken off. But anyway, the third one I had was a mall.
Okay, there's one question for you though. Have you ever seen a Bigfoot? They're asking in the chat. Wild Bob wants to know.
Well, no, I have never seen one. I don't think I've ever seen any tracks either, but maybe I'm a Bigfoot, I think. I made a couple of plywood. You can check them out on Guard Dog Books on Facebook there.
They're great.
Well, I've never seen one. I've seen a lot of pictures, tracks, and listen to radio talk shows and coast to coast and talk about them. And, other native villagers swear by, they call them Kushtaka. And they say there are certain areas in remote Alaska where they travel north and south. They migrate, I think. I don't know. I don't know much about them. The Bible mentions the Nephilim. They were pretty big, too, and it's a plural word, by the way. It's not God or any single. Michael Heiser, or David Heiser, was a biblical scholar and got a doctorate. Could read ancient Hebrew, and he thinks it's a plural word. And the Anunnaki, there was a bunch of them here mining gold, apparently. 400,000 years ago, they came here. Their king is Anu, A-N-U, Anu, King Anu. He sent his sons over here. The first one he got here, they survived. So he sent a message back, and then they sent Enki. Enki was the first, and I believe Enlil, and then the rest, a bunch of them came over here, and then they mined gold for a couple 100,000 years, and they had a slave labor force called the Igigi down in South Africa. There's a city down there buried under 20 feet of gravel they've been digging it out for 20 years, and it's twice the size of Los Angeles, or Los Angeles and London put together, this city. Mm-hmm. And they're built to mine gold. They've been mining gold in South Africa ever since. Now they've got mines that are over 10,000 feet deep in the earth and have tremendous hot temperatures down there. The people they have working there can only stay down a few hours. They don't ever have any white men go down there because it's too hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
can you imagine cables going down 10,000, 9,000 foot down?
That's wild. Do you think they'd get machines, start using some kind of robotics?
Well, anyway, they're mining gold yet, but it's one of the richest areas on the planet. Well, anyway, early on, we were talking about the moon coming in. Well, after I wrote the book, Cosmological Ice Ages, I was doing random searches online to find out if there's just, anything more on the moon out there. Then this chapter popped up. It's titled Earth Without a Moon. And we researched cave paintings to find out if there's any moon in ancient times. There's none of them show up in the cave paintings. The earliest moon we could see was in a Japanese print or some kind. It was about 9,000 years old, possibly. So, but anyway, this book, I kept downloading the chapters, and I finally got to the title page of it. It's In the Beginning is the title of it. It's the first three words of the Bible, In the Beginning. It's written by Immanuel Velikovsky, and it's only 100 pages long. And Chapter 3 talks about a time when there was no moon on the earth, and it's translations from ancient Greek writings. See, Velikovsky was no idiot. He was a Russian scientist, and he could read 6 or 8 languages, including Greek and even Sumerian. And so, anyway, the ancient Greek writings say there was no moon in the sky, and people lived in the mountains and ate acorns. That's a translation. Also, certain Indian tribes and lore and other history talk about a time when there was no moon, about 12,000 years ago.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Timeline. Mm-hmm. And they brought it in, and it took us out of the ice age prematurely. We're still in the ice age, by the way. Their average global temperature is 32 degrees. It's just that they tilted Earth 23.5 degrees to thaw the ice caps back so they could mine gold. It's as simple as that, and they didn't do it for us. Mm-hmm. But they allowed us to live here, and they gave us dominion over the planet, according to Genesis anyway. So when they come back and we've got it all screwed up, they might be unhappy with us.
Hey, Henry, can you elaborate a little bit about the 23.5 degree tilt to basically mine better? How would that be?
Well, you see the sun's rays strike further north and south as your Earth goes around the sun, because now it's tilted. Mm-hmm. You have to hold up an orange or something around and, pretend and tilt it as it's going around the sun, and you can see that the sun's rays penetrate directly into the oceans instead of reflecting off the surface. So it doubled plankton populations, doubled fish populations, probably quadrupled plankton blooms, because you got more sunlight going down into the water because it's more direct, over a larger area of the earth.
Right.
The sun only doesn't really put out that much energy to the earth, really. if you take a solar cell on the Sahara Desert on a good hot sunny day, you can get 1,200 watts out of a square meter. It's a 100% efficient solar cell, for example. But they don't make them that way. They're only about 40% at the most or less. But, you know, the average power striking Earth per square meter is around 300 watts per square meter, 350 watts per square meter. Now, anyone can compute that themselves. You know, you just compute the surface of the Earth, pi r cubed, and you know, the Earth's the radius is around, 8,000 miles in diameter, so 3 times 8 is 24,000 miles around, you know, and so you can figure all this stuff out. Gives you something to do in your spare time, but anyway.
Right.
It only works because a lot of the sunlight's reflected off the ice caps at the poles, and so it only takes in around at half the time, and it's nighttime, so you don't see any sunlight at all. And so it only works out about 300 watts per square meter on the average on the entire surface of the globe. So we figure that the moon actually imparts more energy to Earth gravitationally than the sun does. Now, that sounds really crazy, but that's what we come up with. But anyway, I also want to plug Velikovsky's book. He's probably dead now anyway, so you might find it online there. It's 100 pages. You might want to download that and read it. It's really interesting. Talks about a time when the gold arrived, and history of the Earth is only 100 pages long. It's just, each chapter deals with a certain history of Earth, you know. This guy wrote several best-time seller books that were in the 60s, 50s, Earth in Upheaval, Worlds in Collision, and other ones in New York City, you know, best-selling books there. So anyway, that's about all the data that I have on it. There's a moon chapter. I did a lot of research on it, but I wasn't able to come up with Velikovsky's verification about not being a moon until much later after I wrote the book, you know, until recent times. But it could even be used to terraform other planets. The meteors that we brought back from the moon are the rocks on the surface. A couple of them are older than the Earth, a billion years older. So it might be a manufactured object that they use to tilt planets or terraform them or increase volcanism to replenish the atmosphere. We got to have an atmosphere on Mars. You know, you drill down into the surface, into the center of Mars, and set off a bunch of nuclear explosions. Or you see, Earth is a thorium reactor. That's why the core is hot. Thorium is a very abundant element, and on the surface of the Earth, it's the 32nd in abundance. But at the core, there's probably a lot of thorium down there because it's heavy. And during planet formation, the heavier elements would gravitate toward the center, you know, uranium and nasty stuff down there. There's a lot of radium, gives off deadly rays, and the thorium has a half-life of about 10 billion years. I mean, no more than that, 50 billion years. So the Earth, by the universe, there was no Big Bang because there's no 12 billion year age to the universe, because you wouldn't have elements like thorium with a half-life of 50 billion years. The reason why I say that also is because Earth has a lot of heavy elements. Lead had to decay from uranium or thorium for some, and there's a lot of lead on the Earth. So really, how old is the universe? If those metals were made by exploding stars, these exotic metals, and then they had to form Earth, and then they had to decay into lead either before they were arrived here or afterwards. You know, that they're talking about ages that you can't even wrap your mind around.
Right.
Billions and billions of years, you know. So anyway, this is just random thoughts there on the subject, but
not so random, actually. You know, your IQ's pretty high, I would estimate.
Anyway, yeah, the moon did a lot of good for replenishing Earth and everything, and I don't know when these guys get back here. I'm writing a book now the force where it hit the Arctic Ocean, it was transmitted around the core of the Earth, and it raised up parts of South America 10,000 feet in the air. Lake Titicaca was at sea level. And it's a big lake down there, and right now it's at 10,000 foot altitude. And there's a couple of cities down there that were put together like giant stone Legos blocks. They're Pumapuku and Tiwanaku, and there were these temples and buildings were just scattered about, and an earthquake hit them, and these blocks were designed to fit together to withstand about any kind of earthquake. But those cities are now at 12,000 foot altitude, and people can't hardly live at that altitude or grow. They can't grow food hardly, at that altitude because it's so cold and harsh climate. So they were at sea level or close to it at one time, not long ago, 12,000 years ago. There were people living down there 15,000 years ago, built those cities. And I'm writing a book on it now. It's a compilation of some of all of the giants pictures I can find, and ancient sea maps show Antarctica connected to South America. And it was separated at that time from that tremendous impact on the northern hemisphere. And then Antarctica itself has an average height above sea level of 7,500 feet. And that's why there's so much ice on it. It's cold. It's high altitude. And so the impact raised up Antarctica several thousand feet and tilted Earth. The southern rotational pole was over on the by Australia, between Australia and the ice sheets covered New Zealand, carved out the fjords in the southern island of New Zealand, and carved out part of Australia and covered Hobart. And parts of Antarctica were open and had seaports and people living on them. They could have been Atlantis in Antarctica. They could travel from Africa to Antarctica with sailing ships. The Sumerians would go over there. Some of the sea voyages last 3 years, and they would go over and pick up gold in South America and bring it back over to King Solomon and other guys that were accumulating gold. And King Solomon, I hear, made most of his money making bread. He sold priest bread. He put this white powdered gold into the priest bread, and he would sell it to all of the kings and princesses around the world. They would import it.
That's very interesting. So when is your book going to be out? How long is it going to take you to finish that?
Well, I don't know. I just sort of playing around with it. It's about 400 pages now. I mean, nice. It's ridiculously large. Maybe I need an editor and cut it down or something, do something with it. But
sounds interesting.
I'm trying to figure it out myself. There's actually traces of a canal that's dug from the upper Amazon to the Pacific Ocean that shows up on Google Earth. And there are reports all the way up in the Amazon and people living up in those huge cities up in there, buried in the jungle now. They're just now finding these cities in the jungle, South America. So they could bring gold overland or down the Amazon, and then, the Earth was a little smaller possibly, or expanded after the impact, but, it stopped the gold mining down in South Africa, and they had to get the gold from somewhere else, So when these guys come back here, they gotta collect this gold, right? There's like 500 tons of it in Wall Street somewhere buried under there, so they're all 20-foot tall giants or whatever. We're going to build them outhouses. They can't use ours, I was thinking maybe.
Hey, there's a question. Henry, can I ask you one more time? Bill has a question here. It's a good one. He has a theory on how or why the Earth might have expanded, and his theory is radioactive isotopic decay. And he's wondering if you believe the same.
Well, all the planets have radioactive cores because during planet formation, if there's any heavy elements in the area, they're heavier than the other ones, and they're liquid, so they bubble away for millions of years and then gravitate toward the core of the Earth. And they say Earth has an iron core, but I imagine that most of it's, a good portion of it's thorium, and it keeps the liquid warm inside the Earth. We have tremendous currents under there, magma under the crust. We live on a crust that's only about 50 miles deep, 40 miles someplace under the ocean. It's thinner. And you got liquid rock down there of high temperature. And, a lot of your houses that are built on granite, the radon gas is from radium that's in the granite, and it seeps into the basement, and people get cancer from the radioactivity.
Right.
So they try to block it off with plastic and seal it up to keep the radon gas, from leaking into the basement, But anyway, it's what was the question?
Well, you kind of answered it in a different way, but he was just basically talking about the radioactive isotopic decay, and that was his theory insofar as how the Earth might have expanded. And he was wondering if you believe that.
Well, when I was a kid, I went to the library in Alaska, and they had a book by some German. I can't remember his name, but his whole idea is the continents all sort of fit together like a big jigsaw puzzle, and they expanded and separated. There's one continent called Pangea, and he came up with this thing, and I can't remember his name now because I was just a kid at the time, but the plate tectonics are always expanding. Here's an experiment you can do yourself. Anyone can do this. We have Google Earth nowadays, right? Well, you type into Google age of the Hawaiian Islands, and you get a little map that shows the big islands, 400,000 years old, and the further west you go, they get older and older. So you get over to Kauai, and it's 5,800,000 or 700,000 years or something like that. Well, these islands are formed by one volcanic hotspot, and it's like the big spot on Jupiter. It has something to do with ortho-rotational physics. Earth is rotating, and most objects have this 19.5 degrees north and south of the equator. They got these vortexes. They have them in the southern hemisphere too, but Hawaii just happens to be on one of those vortexes, and it makes a new volcano. Well, as the Earth expands, it makes another island. Obviously, there's a whole chain of islands, and if you look at the map of the Pacific on Google Earth, you can see that they suddenly veer kind of to the northwest. So the Earth shifted back then when that happened. We had a different rotational pole, obviously, because these volcano hotspots are formed at 19.5 degrees, right? So you simply measure the distance on Google Earth between Kauai and the big island of Hawaii, and you convert it to inches. It's, 500 and some miles. You convert it to inches, and then you subtract the age difference, right? 5,100,000 and some thousand, 400,000 from that. Okay, and you divide that into the age difference, and it comes out to about 5 inches a year. You can actually measure the expansion of the Earth on Google Earth, Anyone can do it. You can do it on possibly over on the Atlantic too, and it's a little more over at the Atlantic side. I think it's like 6 or 8 inches a year. But there, you have a mid-ocean rift that's between Hawaii and the United States that's expanding all the time, and it's just like a big crack in the crust of the Earth, and hot liquid rock comes up, and it hits seawater down underneath there, and warms the ocean, gives us global warming, and expands the Earth as you turn that liquid rock back into magma. It takes solid material and makes it into lighter material, which is lava. And then the Earth expands on these cracks. It's got cracks between the continents. It's happening all the time. And you got Atlantic rifts and you got Pacific rifts, And you can measure it on Google Earth. Anybody can do this.
Yeah.
If you got half a brain, and a calculator.
Well, there you go. There's even a calculator online. So you can at least get a plus or minus from it. No doubt. Very, very interesting information here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I discovered that map, Age of the Hawaiian Islands, and then I thought, well, gee, we could figure this stuff out, It's pretty simple.
Yeah, but most people don't take time to do that. Yeah. Yeah, you've taken a lot of time to decode a lot of information.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's part of the book research that I was doing for cosmological ice ages, and
I love it.
I had help from a genius friend of mine, and he died on me, but he's a lot smarter than I am, I think. And he had his own company down there in Seattle and Olalla, Washington, and he worked on primarily worked on yachts, repairing their electronics and other things, and autopilots. The state of Alaska wanted somebody to fix the stabilizers on the Tustamina, the big ferry boat we have between Dutch Harbor and Anchorage and around. They lengthened it out, and it's kind of a, I don't know, I don't like it. It's kind of flat bottom and dangerous, I think. But I rode the second trip on it to Kodiak, and they're playing with their stabilizer fins. Fins out the side, and they turn this toggle switch on and almost roll the boat over.
Wow.
So they have cars and trucks and stuff down there, and they have to chain them down to keep them shifting around. Well, I was up in the lounge, and they have a bar up there. I mean, we fishermen drink a lot of beer and stuff, and supposedly we're clinging to a bar stool, and all the tables are moving around, and the stewards are all upset, and they're roping them up with a rope so they couldn't move, and tables and chairs everywhere. And, anyway, years later, they tried to get somebody to fix the stabilizers on the Tustamina, and they called around the shipyards all around Seattle. They had it in dry dock in Seward over here. It was up on land, a huge ship. Anyway, the only person they could find was my friend Brad Guth. The other shipyard guys didn't want to deal with Alaska and deal with this complicated project, so they called Brad. Brad said he'd do it for $18,000, pay me half now. So Brad downloaded the schematics of the diagram of the stabilizer system and made a printed circuit board, and his whole plan was to just pull out the old circuit board and shove his in there and fix the stabilizers. He made the circuit board. Anyway, called my son up in Anchorage, and he had a Z car with oversized tires on it that wouldn't go under 100 miles an hour, and he wanted him to drive him to Seward in a snowstorm in the winter. So anyway, my son met him at the airport. He's crazy. They drove him to Seward through slush and snow and rain. And Brad got on there, put his little circuit board in there, turned the switches on. It wouldn't work right. So there was nothing wrong with the stabilizer system. So he traced the wires down to the engine room. And they have three-phase motors that operate these fins, see. And I worked in the shipyards. I know all about three-phase motors. If you reverse two of the legs, just take two wires and turn them around the other two, it'll run the opposite direction, So what he did, he had to reverse these legs on these three-phase motors, and then this thing worked perfectly. That was all that was wrong with it to begin with. And any competent engineer could have figured that out, but the state doesn't hire competent people, I guess. And that fixed it. And they didn't pay him for about a year and a half, 2 years later. And they wanted him to do another job. He says, fine, pay me what you owe me first.
Yeah, no kidding.
Then he worked on something else, but I don't remember what it was. But I give him credit as co-author to my book because we were talking about these ice core graphs, and we could measure carbon dioxide, notice a drop in regular intervals. It matches the ice age cycle, 105,000 years. And you can download hundreds of them off the internet. Every nation in the world has been drilling through Antarctica and Greenland to find out data on the ice, and they measure snowfall and carbon dioxide content in the little air bubbles and other things, temperature. So they get a record of that. They drill down. They can go back 400,000 years in Antarctica some places.
Wow, very interesting. You know what? Captain Henry, we're out of time here. I must say, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure always. And I wish you a very happy new year. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and great questions in the chat, everybody. And also stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunter and Mickey coming up next to sell you on it tonight. From Down Under with their wonderful show. They're going to be talking about 2018 retrospective. All right, Henry, we're out of time. Thank you so much. You take care, and we'll talk soon.
Well, happy and prosperous New Year's, everybody. And don't forget to download my books.
That's right. All right, everybody.
Buy a few of them, too, while you're at it.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Now a holiday message to our favorite people in all the world, our listeners. Revolution Radio is you. Now, thanks to your continuing support, Revolution Radio will embark on its 6th year, bigger and better than ever. You, the listeners, have made Revolution Radio what it is, the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported talk radio station on the web and in the world. With 24 hours of live programming, 92 hosts on 2 astounding networks, Studio A and Studio B, delivering directly to you the most cutting-edge information available. In fact, you, the listeners, have gone on to be some of our most popular radio hosts. You, the listener, offer feedback that molds our programming to appeal to our worldwide audience. In fact, you, the listener, provide us with eyes and ears on the ground to give us the inside scoop on stories the mainstream media fears to touch, reporting about newsworthy events in your area, and you, the listener, are the lifeblood of this station. And we thank you for being such a treasured member of our Revolution Radio family. And so this holiday season, from all of us to all of you, have a happy and safe holiday season, and let's make this new year a success once again together. Thank you.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon